Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports, and we're a quarter of the way through the NBA season. It's crazy how fast it's come and gone up to this point. So it's the 25% special here at Utility Sports, where a quarter of the way through the NBA season, we drop another NBA mock draft, this time for the 2023 NBA draft class, which is loaded. Emphasis on loaded. When I was putting together this draft class mock draft here, I was at players at 15, 16, 17. I'm like, wow, this player feels like a top 10 talent. And I had him all the way down outside of the lottery. That's how good this draft is. So when we go through it, I'm going to talk about some of the strengths, weaknesses for all these players. And I hope you guys really do enjoy. I've put a lot of work into these videos. A lot of time goes into even making the graphics for these, let alone thinking through the actual process of who would pick who. And of course, actually watching the players and being able to talk about these players for an hour at length without any pauses goes to show how much time I spend watching these players. So hopefully you guys do enjoy this video. So let's get into it here now with a video preview. The draft order is based on the standings as of November 29th, 2022. And I would love for you guys to go follow Utility Sports on Twitter. Links in the description. We will respond to all direct messages and mentions over the next 48 hours. So if you have any questions about the NBA draft, if you have any questions about basketball in general, or just want to chat a little bit, go ahead, go message us over there on Twitter. Again, the link is in the description. So go follow us on Twitter. And I'm going to emphasize it again, draft order is based on the standings as of November 29th. I always get questions about it. So if you guys see questions in the comment section about why a team's pick and where, please explain it to them. You can timestamp this time in the video right now for that. Let's get into it here. I just want to remind you guys, like and subscribe. Only about 11.3% of our watch time comes from subscribers. We have over 15,000 subs, but based on my math, which is really rough here, based on watch time, if everyone hit that sub button, we'd have around 140,000 subs, which would be insane. I'd love for us to get to that point at some point. Of course, no pressure, but it is free, so go ahead, hit that subscribe button, and let's get into it here now. First pick, the Detroit Pistons here at this spot, and they've been here before. 2 years ago, they took Cade Cunningham first overall. Troy Weaver nailed it again last year with both Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, both great selections for that team. So you've got to look at where Detroit's headed right now. They've got a lot of really great players. And yes, they took a center last year in Jalen Duren. But if they get the first overall pick, just like any of the other 29 teams, there is no hesitation in who they would select. They would take center Victor Wembanyama from Mets 92. Overseas this year, he's leading the league he's playing in points, rebounds, and his team has the best record in the league. So you're looking at probably another example of what we saw from Luka Doncic a few years ago. Someone who was an overseas MVP and somebody who's going to come in and be an immediate impact player. Victor Wembanyama is arguably the best prospect the world has ever seen, especially probably in the last 2, maybe 3 decades for the NBA. You think back to some guys that are comparable for prospect evaluation, guy like Hakeem Olajuwon. And yes, I include LeBron James in the fact that Victor Wembanyama is probably a higher touted prospect. Think about it. Historically in the NBA, we've seen the center get drafted before the wing. It always happens. It always does. Now, does it mean it's always the right pick? No, but when we're talking about prospects and who would go first overall, think back to Olajuwon over Jordan. Think to DeAndre Ayton over Luka Doncic. LeBron James, there wasn't really a top big man in his class like that. Of course, Chris Bosh was in there. Darko Milicic was in there. But as a European player, there was a little bit more questionability about what he was going to be. Well, Victor Wembanyama here, there's no question marks. He came over to Henderson, Las Vegas, and gave G League Ignite the work, and he's given everyone the work now. The best prospect I've ever seen play, the most talented prospect I've seen play. The only guy really in my time as a talent evaluator that's even close is Luka Doncic. I was shocked when he went third in his own draft class. Teams aren't going to make that same mistake. Victor Wembanyama goes first this year. Second overall, we have the Orlando Magic on the clock now, and we talk about teams that just had the first overall pick. Looks like Orlando did pretty well with Paolo Banchero. I think he's the front runner to win Rookie of the Year. I liked his game coming in out of Duke. I got very, very close to moving him up my big board. You guys know where I had him. If you want to go back to that, I would recommend going and check that out. I talked about my top 60 the day before the draft, so there's a lot to break down in that one. But let's get to this pick here. Scoot Henderson, and this is a dream outcome for Orlando. Of course, Paulo Banchero had some interesting words saying that Bol does a lot of the stuff Victor Wembanyama does. He does. I don't know if it's going to be at as high of a level and impact winning as much as Victor Wembanyama, I think, is going to do in the NBA. But Bol's a fun player. I think he's a good player in the NBA, especially with some of the steps we've seen him take forward this year. But Orlando badly needs a point guard, and Scoot Henderson really addresses that here. When you look at what Scoot Henderson brings, it's basically everything Orlando doesn't have. A lead point guard. Someone who has really grown as a facilitator. He had, I believe, a 14 or 15 assist game the other day for G League Ignite. I watched most of the highlights of that game. I did not actually get to watch that game. I was busy watching other games. But you look at what he's been able to do. Some of the passing reads he's made have been insane. I do have a scouting profile video up on the channel of Scoot Henderson. I'm enamored with this kid's game. Most years he'd be the number one pick. If Victor Wembanyama didn't exist, he'd be the number one pick, just like Wembanyama said. And I think Scoot is a really talented, good young player, and somebody who I believe is a franchise changer for Orlando. Paulo, Franz, Scoot, Suggs, Bol, Wendell Carter. You've got a really nice core there in Orlando moving forward. Pick 3, we got the Houston Rockets here now, and I don't think they're mad about who they grabbed at 3 last year. Jabari Smith, I've had some questions on the channel. Why is he struggling so much? Remember, I kind of predicted this. I said I was a little hesitant about putting him on my all-rookie first team, and I think that he still can make the all-rookie first team. He just has to pick up his play a little bit more toward the, second, third, and fourth quarters of the season. Right now, we're through one quarter. I think he's going to figure things out, but part of that is he's playing with 2 scoring guards, so the quality of looks he's going to get maybe not quite as strong because, sometimes the passes aren't as accurate as they need to be. Sometimes they're not on time, but I think I don't have any concerns about Jabari Smith. I think the Rockets are in a pretty good long-term spot right now, and we're going to find a guard who can get him the rock, and that's Nick Smith Jr., someone who we haven't seen regular season play from him for Arkansas. He's obviously been coming through off of some injury concerns with his knee, but in the preseason, we got to see him a little bit overseas, play against some pro teams in other countries, and he's looked really good in those games. And I think when you look back at his high school footage, which I do a lot of here, Nick Smith Jr. is somebody who he averaged around 26, 27 points a game, 8 or 9 assists, 7 rebounds a game. He's not the biggest guard. He's about 6'3". He's kind of around the same size as Scoot Henderson, but he's a really mature playmaker. He's a very adept scorer. Even when he's not the most athletic guy in the gym, he's got a really good runner that he can rely on. He knows how to get to his spots. He's a confident shot maker. And like I said, he's a floor general. And this is something Houston's lacking here. I've come across and I've got a little bit of flack in the past for how I felt about Kevin Porter Jr. I think there's a lot of talent there with him. I just don't know if it's the point guard position. I think he'd be one of the better 6 men in the league. I think he'd be a really quality starting wing. I just don't see him as a point guard. I think he's a scoring, ball-dominant guard. But getting a guy like Nick Smith Jr. next to him, Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, Alperen Şengün, the list goes on there in Houston with some of that young talent. They need a mature guard like Nick Smith Jr., who, yes, he's still young. There's going to be growing pains with him still. But the way he plays basketball, you can tell he reads the game like a savvy veteran at times. And I think that's where it's going to really help Houston moving forward. Pick 4, Charlotte Hornets here now. I actually have a video coming up on the channel the day after this video comes out, talking about who Charlotte should maybe trade away, and maybe it'll help them with some chances getting the number 1 pick to land Victor Wembanyama. Right now, they're at pick number 4, which is a weird spot to be in this draft, but the player I have them taking is guard/forward Amen Thompson from Overtime Elite. And this is a player who I think there's going to be a lot of hype around. He's a 6'7" guard who can handle, can pass, he's athletic, just can't really shoot. And you might say, well, he's checking most of those boxes for you. He's going to have some really nice defensive highlights. He's a really good playmaker. I want to emphasize that. He's a very smart passer, and he knows where to put the basketball. He's really adept at reading lob situations. The one thing, though, is as someone who right now projects to be not a great shooter at the NBA level, does that limit what he's going to be, especially come playoff time? We've seen guards in the past who can't shoot. Think Ben Simmons, Russell Westbrook. That tends to lead to some struggles. Now, I don't want to put Amen Thompson in that category. There's still a lot of room for him to work on his game. This is a 19-year-old kid. We don't need to be panicked about what he's going to be when he's 27 yet. But when you're making the decisions, you're getting paid millions of dollars to do it. You do have to consider that. So I'm not putting him in a box where his development can go. I still think that there's a lot of room for him. But as of right now, I'm not completely sure. This is a swing on the upside, though, for Charlotte. If you're at this spot, you need another franchise level player to go with LaMelo Ball in order to get to where you want to go ultimately. And I think Mitch Kupchak here rolls the dice with Amen Thompson. I think it's a fairly safe bet. I think he's going to be good. I just don't know how great he can become if that shooting doesn't come around. Pick 5, the San Antonio Spurs here now. And I tried warning Spurs fans. I'm saying, hey, you guys are going to end up here. Don't worry. In my other mocks, I was saying, don't worry. They're going to find their way toward the top of the draft. And here they are, pick number 5 now. And with this pick, I have them going with forward Cam Whitmore from Villanova, one of my favorite players in this year's draft. He is the definition of pro ready. He's athletic. He's smart. He took over this past summer for the FIBA U20 squad. He was just so dominant. And I think he's somebody who, with his athleticism, with his ability to knock down the perimeter shot, with his ability to get in the passing lanes and defend, he does a lot of really good things on the basketball court, not only with the ball in his hands, but without the ball in his hands on both ends of the floor. And that's really where the value comes here for San Antonio. He's a very good player and he's really pro ready. And I think San Antonio, we've seen in the past, they've kind of shied away from maybe some more of those pro ready players. You think back to when they drafted DeJounte Murray, Lonnie Walker, you think maybe even Devin Vassell to a certain extent. Some of those guys weren't as pro ready. Now, it's not that they were bad picks. In fact, most of those picks were good picks. And I think that a lot of those guys are going to have really long careers in the NBA. DeJounte Murray's turned into an all-star. Devin Vassell, I'm still really high on. I love his potential still at this point. I think he's starting to show that a little bit more this year. Lonnie Walker's balling out for the Lakers this year. So not to say that that's a bad way to go, but a player here like Cam Whitmore, who's a little bit more of a sure thing, but I still think there's a lot of upside. It hasn't been in their nature the last few drafts, but I still think it's a really good play for them here. And, you know, some of those other examples, like Josh Primo, haven't worked out so well. Lucas Samanic, another example of that too. Pick 6, the New Orleans Pelicans here now. This pick comes from those Lakers I just mentioned a second ago, and this is scary. The Pelicans could have a top 10 pick, and who knows, if the lottery luck goes right for them, they could be picking in the top 3 and maybe landing one of these elite prospects this year. But like I said, the draft's really deep, and there's a really good player here for them to draft. And that's forward Brandon Miller from Alabama, who's been one of college basketball's best players this year. He's averaging around 20 points a game on efficient shooting. He's knocking down the 3-ball consistently as well, which was one of the bigger question marks for him. If you guys remember back to my before the season mock draft, which is now almost 2 months ago, I was kind of not sure what to think about Brandon Miller, Dylan Mitchell, Baba Miller. I kind of had those 3 guys in a tier together, saying these are the wings that are going to be on my radar. Well, Brandon Miller is starting to separate himself from those other 2. He's been really balling out for the Crimson Tide. They had a big win the other day over UNC. The Tar Heels are pretenders, by the way. But nonetheless here, Brandon Miller is a baller. And New Orleans probably doesn't need another forward. They don't need another wing, but they're drafting best player available here. And if you're New Orleans, if you're in the shoes of David Griffin there and you're the decision maker, you have to ask yourself, why would we not draft the best player here? Because the best player is usually the one with the most trade value, and it gives them flexibility to construct their roster later. Last year, they went a little bit more project with Dyson Daniels, and I think that, I don't think I would have went the same way, to be completely honest with you, though. Pick 6 here, though, I'd be hard-pressed not to draft Brandon Miller. There's another player here on the board I really like that maybe I would prefer, but just with their pick of Dyson Daniels, I don't think that this next guy is as likely of a selection for them. Pick 7, we get to Oklahoma City here now, and the Oklahoma City Thunder are kind of the MO when it comes to the NBA draft, right? Sam Presti's put his name out there as the guy who's willing to tank and try and get draft picks, and well, it's going to be hard to do that because Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is one of the best players in the world right now. To me, it looks like he would be a lock for all NBA. He leads the league in 30-point games. I actually believe he's tied now with Luka Doncic at 15 of them through the first 20 games of the season. That is mental. He is such a good player, and they've got some other good talent there around him. Josh Giddey, I really like his game. Lou Dort's another good complementary player. Chet Holmgren, I was really high on. I think Holmgren's going to have a really nice NBA career. Of course, we're going to hope he stays healthy. He had a freak injury in the Drew League. I'm not going to panic and hit the panic button about him quite yet. Oklahoma City here, though, at 7. Who do they go with? I'm looking at forward Dariq Whitehead, formerly my projected number 3 player in the draft, has not lived up to those expectations at Duke. It's been a really rough start to his freshman season for the Blue Devils. He's shooting really low percentages from the field and from 3, and that's just not what you would guess. You turn on his film at Montverde, there's a reason he won National Player of the Year in high school. He was an elite shot maker. He played with great balance. His shot mechanics are fluid. Everything about him looked really, really great in high school. And I'm not hitting the panic button yet either on his college game. I think that things are going to turn around. I think he's just adjusting to the speed of the game. Maybe it's taking him a little bit longer than we'd hope, but he's still a top 10 talent in this class. Please do not sell your Dariq Whitehead stock. I really believe in this kid. I think he's a very talented player and somebody who, if you give him a little bit of time here to readjust and recalibrate his game, there's just too much talent on the bone to not to ignore. All right, the Oklahoma City, this is a dream come true for Sam Presti. If he's available at 7, Sam Presti's going to run this pick up to the podium himself with excitement and joy, because a player this good being at 7 kind of feels exactly what they need. Another shot-making wing to put next to Shea, Dort, Giddey, Holmgren. You're looking at a really good filled-out roster moving forward. Pick 8, Orlando on the clock again. Talk about how scary New Orleans can be. Well, heck, Orlando, if they get a top 2 pick this year at either Wembanyama or Scoot, and then they come in at 8 and add another really good player, the league should be actually a little worried here. Fultz and Jonathan Isaac. Fultz obviously about to make his season debut. And when we look at Jonathan Isaac, I still think that there's something there. Whether that means they trade him and bring in a little bit of value that way, or they get him back into the rotation, I think he could help them along still. 2, at this spot though, the player that I really like here, guard/forward Anthony Black. One of my favorite players to talk about in this draft. He's such a good defensive playmaker. His arms go on for days, as Jay Billis would say. I always love quoting him on that, because that's what he says after pick 15 in every draft class, because it's almost like he doesn't know enough about the prospects from an NBA standpoint. But you look at Anthony Black here, and for Orlando, we talked about, hey, they got Scoot Henderson, they got that lead guard. Well, we're not sure what Jalen Suggs is yet. I think Suggs is still a good combo guard. I think there's value in this league for Jalen Suggs. He just hasn't clicked as quickly as I think everyone else expected him to. Remember, a lot of people had him above Scotty Barnes on their draft boards. I was not one of those people, but a lot of people did. Now, when we look at Anthony Black here, this is, I think, a safer bet to pair alongside Scoot Henderson, simply because he's bigger. He's about 6'6", 6'7". He's got that long, lengthy wingspan like I talked about. And he's someone who, at Arkansas, he's had back-to-back 26-point games this past week. He's also been somebody who's been dishing out 6 assists a game or so. He's competent to be a lead playmaker at certain times in the NBA. Probably not for an offense for an entire game, but can he run a second unit? Most definitely he can. And the three-point shot has looked better than I was expecting. That was the big question coming out of college into Arkansas is, does this Razorbacks team have enough shooting? And what is Anthony Black specifically going to look like as a shooter? He's answering those questions really well, and if he continues to take steps forward, I think Orlando could be a real nightmare with the length that they would have. We already talked about Scoot, talked about Paulo, talked about Franz, Bull, Wendell Carter. You know, they still got Mo Bamba there as well. Anthony Black is a 2. My goodness, this team's got so much length and size. It sounded like something all the women would want, to be honest. Going on to pick number 9 now, the New York Knicks here at this spot. And the Knicks, they've been a little up and down this year. Julius Randle's had some really bright moments. So has Jalen Brunson. But this team's just not winning as many games as I think they would like to, as indicated by being in the lottery here at this spot. And the Knicks here, I would have them go with Ausar Thompson, the twin brother of Amen Thompson. You might be saying, have we guy already? Sort of. He's got a very similar game to his twin brother, as everyone would likely expect. But I think it's a little bit of that Marcus Morris, Markieff Morris situation where one just does stuff a little bit better than the other, and maybe is a little bit better of a basketball player. Ausar Thompson, I think, a little bit further behind in his development. Again, scouting overtime elite players is hard because they're playing against a lot of high school kids. They're playing against a lot of prep schools, and the level of competition really wavers. There's more transition play, and quite frankly, the officiating's a little questionable. The schemes, the offenses are a little questionable. Not something that makes it super easy to project what they're going to be in the NBA. So what you're really looking for is traits and skill set. And Ausar Thompson has those things. He's a very talented, passer, just like his brother. I would say a little bit less so. The shot making still a question, but there's not a lot of wings in this class, more athletic and more gifted as a facilitator than Ausar Thompson, which is what makes him super interesting. I kind of see him being a hybrid 3-2, whereas Amen Thompson's probably more of a 1-2 combo guard. So that's kind of the flaw here with him, is he's not going to be someone you put the ball in their hands as much, but he's still going to be a successful player for sure. Pick number 10, the Knicks on the clock again here. This pick comes from the Dallas Mavericks, who had a huge win over the Golden State Warriors, and Luka Doncic, been one of the best basketball players in the world. No surprise there. But pick 10, the Knicks now at this spot, they're going to go with guard Cason Wallace, and I think Tom Thibodeau would probably pass out or have a heart attack if he was available here at this pick and the Knicks didn't take him, simply because he is a dog and he is one of the better defensive players in this class as a guard. Now, I think there's going to be a little bit of misnomer here with this. People are going to start labeling him as a great defender, and I think people are going to automatically start to assume he's an on-ball stopper. That's not what he is. He's not Davion Mitchell. He's just not. But what he is a really, really smart off-ball defensive player who is going to go in, make a ton of defensive plays, and occasionally one-on-one, he can pick you, and he can also get down in a stance and get a stop when he has to. Again, not a stopper, not someone who's going to be like, oh my gosh, here's the number one assignment, go put Cason Wallace on him and we're good. It's going to be, there's elements of him to that, but I think most of his greatness defensively that we've seen so far, at least this year for Kentucky, has been off the ball and timely playmaking as a defensive player, which has been awesome. He had a game where he had over 7 steals. But my favorite play of him that game was there was a huge play down the stretch. I believe Kentucky ended up losing the game, but big man gets an offensive rebound. Cason Wallace comes out of nowhere and gets a held ball with him. And it was possession Kentucky, one of the biggest plays of the game. Cason Wallace was the one there making it. And that timeliness is what I'm talking about here. He's smart. He's positionally aware. And this would be perfect for New York here right now, who knows what the future of Evan Fournier is. Obviously, they have Jalen Brunson. They don't necessarily need a guard terribly bad, but Cason Wallace has the length to disrupt wings. So he's somebody who, when we talk about versatility, he kind of fits the bill there as someone who can play off the ball, but we're also seeing good shot making from him up to this point of the season. Pick 11, the Miami Heat here now on the board. And I'm just waiting for this team to get going. A little up and down. They've had a lot of injury concerns. Jimmy Butler's missed quite a bit of time. Kyle Lowry's like second in the league in minutes at the time I'm recording this, which is pretty nuts. But once this team is healthy, they'll be fine. But we're looking at the long-term outlook here, and Kyle Lowry being second in the league in minutes is kind of a red flag for me. And I just think long-term, they need to find a true starting point guard. And we're talking about Keontae George for Baylor, who he has not been the best guard on his team this year. In fact, there's been multiple guards better than him this year. I think one guy who's really stood out to me for Baylor is Adam Flagler, who's having a really nice season this year. LJ Cryer's also been really good for them. But Keontae George, the reason I want to talk about him here for Miami is you watch him and the skill set kind of pops. He's somebody who, once he puts everything together at Baylor, you're going to be able to see the athleticism, the shot making, the creativity as a passer. There was one play the other day where he was going downhill. I believe they were playing UCLA. It was an Amari Bailey versus Keontae George game that really had me tuned in for that one. But Keontae George throws a wonderful lob pass in transition, one that I feel like a lot of younger guards wouldn't have even seen the opportunity to do that. And not only did he see that opportunity, he put it right on the money in a spot where only his teammate could go get it. And it was a big momentum play. He's also a very willing defender, at least at this point of his college career. Sometimes we see those guys adjust to the NBA and struggle a little bit more. But his athleticism at the college level, at least, has stood out to me. He looks like somebody who belongs and somebody who I think right now, just based on his skill set and some of the things that the eye test present, he's likely going to be a lottery pick. I know his stats don't really back that up. His production hasn't been as great as maybe a lot of people were expecting. But at the end of the day, Keontae George, still a good player and somebody who I think scouts and executives are going to have their eyes on in this range. Pick 12, the Utah Jazz here now. Look at that highlighter yellow. Such a beautiful, beautiful color. No facetiousness there from me. But this pick comes from the Timberwolves, who just haven't looked as good as I thought they were. So maybe shame on me a little bit. And now Cat's out for the rest of the season. Not for the rest of the season, excuse me, for about 4 to 6 weeks. So that's going to put a little bit of a damper on the Wolves this season as well. And the Jazz here go with a really nice player in Jarris Walker for the 1-seeded Houston Cougars at the time I'm recording this. Houston's been great this year. Jarris Walker's a great example of a player who, to me, kind of looks like what DeAndre Hunter was a few years ago when he was a top 4 pick. Jarris Walker, he's got a really good back to the basket game. He's a good post-up player, can face up too. He's got a nice mid-range jump shot. And look at those guns. He's big, he's strong, he's physical. Utah is going to need some of those elements. Now, I really like Jared Vanderbilt still for them. I think Jared Vanderbilt's one of the more underrated players in the NBA. A lot of people don't even really know what he is. As a player, don't really know what he brings. Jarris Walker, probably not the best fit with Jared Vanderbilt, but Utah right now, they don't really care what's on their current roster. They'll make trades to adjust if they have to, kind of like what we talked about with some of the other teams earlier. Right now, you're in talent acquisition mode. Drafting is about talent acquisition. That's one of the biggest question marks I get from a lot of people is, well, do you draft based off of fit or need, or do you draft based on talent? And I think the teams that get themselves in trouble too often try and draft the player that they feel like they need or feel like fits, instead of just saying, hey, look, this is the best player available. We all know it. Let's just go take him. Jarris Walker here, probably an example of that for Utah. Is like, hey, this kid's just really good at basketball. He's not going to do a ton of stuff that jumps off the screen, but anyone who really knows basketball is watching closely. They're going to notice the box outs. They're going to notice the physical presence he brings on both ends of the floor, and I think he sticks out here to me for Utah. Pick 13 now, the Brooklyn Nets here. And this pick is going to be a controversial one a little bit. I don't think it solves their issues, but I think it's a really fun player to discuss. And that is Texas forward Dillon Mitchell. I brought him up earlier when we talked about Brandon Miller and how Miller's kind of separated himself from the other guys. The reason for that, I wanted to see Dillon Mitchell play on the basketball more this year. We haven't seen that at Texas. He still plays pretty much exclusively out of the corner like he did at Montverde. And some people probably look at that as a huge turnoff for draft stock and what can this kid be at the next level. And to a certain extent, it does that for me, right? I'm not going to buy into the fact that maybe he can create a little bit more on ball and maybe that he can utilize his athleticism in some different ways. But there is a real positive to this, and this is something I want to talk about here for Dillon Mitchell. He plays exclusively off the basketball, and he's a really smart cutter. He's one of the most athletic players in the draft, if not the most athletic player. He's going to be a putback machine in the NBA. And yes, this maybe isn't the best fit with Brooklyn, and maybe it's not the best fit next to Ben Simmons and Nick Claxton. I think Brooklyn's just got to operate with a blank slate. We don't know if Kevin Durant's going to be there. I'm sure Kyrie Irving probably won't be there, but who really knows what's going on with that? You just got to draft players who you believe are good and are going to have nice long careers in the NBA. And Dillon Mitchell is going to be somebody who does that because of the way he plays. You think about him, there's not a lot of times that college players come in and they know how to play off the ball. Most players drafted in the lottery are guys who have the basketball in their hands or their offense kind of ran through him. Well, at Texas, it doesn't run through Dillon Mitchell. So that means he's going to come into the NBA already knowing how to do a lot of stuff to play off of Kevin Durant, to play off of Kyrie Irving. And if those guys aren't on the Nets, somebody else will be there that probably has the ball in their hands a lot. Dillon Mitchell is going to help amplify other players and kind of clean up possessions that things aren't going well. We look at how important Derek White was last year for the Boston Celtics. Well, now make Derek White way more athletic, way lengthier, and somebody who, as a college player, knows exactly how to play that way. It's going to be a fun player to watch for the remainder of his career. I think Dillon Mitchell is going to be the litmus test on who really knows basketball in this draft cycle, honestly, because some people are going to be really bored by him because he's not, hitting between the leg crosses and making people fall over and hitting step back threes. He's going to be somebody who works hard, gets in the right position offensively, and cleans up a lot of possessions. So I really like Dillon Mitchell still, even though for the draft stock purpose, he's probably slid a little bit from where I had him at the start of the year. Pick 14, the Atlanta Hawks here now. In Atlanta, they've been a little up and down this year. Of course, they had the meltdown against the Houston Rockets where Trae Young and DeJounte Murray were a little too loud, a little too soon, and the Hawks ended up losing that game. But here with this pick, they go with forward Baba Miller. And I think for Atlanta, this is a pick that kind of matches what they would likely do here. John Collins has been on the trade block since the dinosaurs were roaming around the earth. At some point, they're going to trade him, you would think, because he's been on the trade block the last 3 seasons. And if they can move him, there's going to be a long-term need at the forward spot. I like Jalen Johnson back when they drafted him, but he hasn't gotten the consistent minutes. So For me, it's hard to envision that they have him in their long-term picture at this point. But who knows? Maybe they do. I mean, it took them like 2 years to figure out if Onyeka Okongwu was ever going to play. So at this spot, I think a forward like Baba Miller, who is extremely lengthy. He's 6'11". I think he's a smart defensive player, and there's not a lot of players who move like wings at 6'11" in this draft. There's just not. Baba Miller's one of them. And if you can add that here back into the lottery, I think that makes a lot of sense for any team, but specifically Atlanta with the John Collins question mark. Pick 50 now, one pick outside the lottery. We're looking at the Washington Wizards. And I tried telling people last year that Kristaps Porzingis would have been a pretty nice player for the Mavericks to keep. Just had a 41 piece the other night against the Minnesota Timberwolves. And he's somebody who is one of the most special players in the NBA. There's not a lot of 7'3" guys roaming around who can shoot the three ball like he does and protect the rim the way he does. Both things that Dallas could really use this year, coincidentally. But Washington now at this pick, I think that they have some question marks. And this is one of those examples of a player when I talked about in the open of this draft is loaded. There is no way in like any of the past 3 drafts GG Jackson would not have went in the lottery. I have him here at pick 15. He has been playing great basketball in the SEC for South Carolina. He has really popped to me. The 3-point shot has looked a lot more consistent than I expected it to be. He has some serious fluidity downhill as a scorer. And by the way, this kid's extremely athletic as well. I talked about the athleticism of some of the other players, Dylan Mitchell. I mean, GG Jackson's in all of these categories. Oh, and by the way, he just happens to also be the youngest player in this draft class, more than likely, unless something unforeseen happens with a player reclassifying like what happened with Shaedon Sharpe last year. So GG Jackson is going to be a really fun player to talk about this draft cycle. Again, the athleticism pops. He's a 4-man who can jump out of the gym. And for Washington, you might be saying, well, it seems like they drafted a lot of forwards. Rui Hachimura is in the final year of his deal. He has not gotten an extension up to this point. In fact, I would expect him to get traded this trade deadline. So GG Jackson becomes the obvious replacement there, and somebody who I think is just a way better fit on this roster. More athleticism, a little bit more selfless, better 3-point shooter. I think that a lot of those things are going to lean its way into being better for Washington. It just comes down to if Tommy Shepard's actually going to be willing to take a freshman player because he just doesn't typically do that. You think about some of his past draft picks, Corey Kispert, Johnny Davis, neither of those two were freshmen when he drafted them. Pick 16, Utah back on the clock now. They're second of 3 picks in this first round. And with this pick, I have them going with forward Amani Bates, who I think is one of the more fun players to talk about in this draft as well. This draft has me really excited. I hope you guys can see that when you're watching this video, how excited I am to talk about all these players. Because this draft class is loaded, and Amani Bates might be one of the more talented players in it. It's just about putting everything together for him. He's had moments where he struggled. He's had moments where he shined. Think about Memphis last year. That was, excuse my language, but a shit show for Amani Bates. It was just not good. Got basically played off the floor for most of the year. And Penny Hardaway couldn't trust him. He goes and transfers out to Eastern Michigan. Well, he's been playing good basketball for them. Of course, he had the headline game against Michigan, that in-state game where he really led his team into that game to have a shot to win. Now, obviously, things didn't all play out that way, but for the most part, he was the best player on the floor in that game. And there's some other good players there. You know, you think about some of the other talented players who may or may not be in this first-round mock draft still at this point, and if they're not, they're probably a top of the second-round talent. At least at this point, things can change. I like Amani Bates a lot. And Utah, if they're going to have 3 first-round picks this year, I would be hard-pressed to pass on Amani Bates more than once. Because like, if you're going to take shots and risks, Amani Bates is the type of player you want to bet on. You watch this guy in individual workouts, and you're going to be like, wow, he's like 6'8", and he's dribbling the ball like that, and he's moving like... There's just not a lot of players who can do what he does at his size with his length. And that's really what we're talking about for draft prospects is the physicals are what really elevate draft status, and the skill set paired with those physicals is really what makes players special, or at least appear special, and I think Amani Bates is in that category. Pick 17, the Golden State Warriors here now. I told you guys this team's going to figure it out. The last mock draft, they were like picking 6th or something. Here they're at 17. This team is, don't panic on Golden State. They're going to be just fine. The team's good. Klay Thompson's been playing better. Didn't play great against Dallas, but, you know, for the most part, this team's been better. So, at this spot, what do I see them doing? Khalil Ware, center from Oregon. And this is a big shakeup for anyone who's been watching these mock drafts. Typically, I've had Derek Lively be the next center off the board after Victor Wembanyama. Not anymore. Khalil Ware's been outplaying Derek Lively. Lively obviously has had some struggles early in the year. And Khalil Ware's been playing great for Oregon, specifically off the bench. Not typically something you see. Big 5-star recruit, McDonald's All-American, going into a program that, by the way, isn't like that great of a basketball program in recent years. And he's coming off the bench. It's just not something you typically see, but that's what's happening, and it's working out really well for him. He's been a rebound machine in limited minutes. He's been very, very productive offensively, and I think one thing I'd be remiss not to mention is how athletic this kid is. You know, he's kind of a beanpole right now. He's pretty skinny, lengthy, but he can really jump, and he can move downhill, and I think there's a lot to work with here for Golden State. Now, you might say, well, they already have that with James Wiseman. That's what kind of the point of this is here. If James Wiseman, if they decide to cut their losses and use him in a trade, which they won't do during the season, I almost promise it, because Bob Myers, I believe, has made one trade in the season in the last 5 years or 6 years or maybe even 7 years. And that was D'Angelo Russell for Andrew Wiggins in that first. That turned into Jonathan Kuminga. Like, they just don't make trades during the year. But if they were to, Khalil Ware would be the player that would make sense as like a long-term, hey, we don't have Wiseman anymore. Let's get another athletic big in here who maybe we can help him develop and fit into our system, which it's a very difficult system to run. Kevon Looney's been doing it perfectly for years, but at some point they're going to look for another depth piece to fit in there. Pick 18, the Sacramento Kings here now, and with Sacramento on the board, first of all, I want to commend them. They've been playing really well. Kevin Huerter's been a flamethrower this year. I still don't love the fact that they traded away all of their flexibility for Kevin Huerter, but hey, he's sniping the heck out of the basketball right now, so he's been playing great. And here at this pick, I have them going with forward Arthur Kaluma. The big question mark for them, Harrison Barnes. He's an impending free agent. What will he do? Obviously, they have Keegan Murray here. So this is where Keegan Murray would probably become the full-time 4. Probably slide Arthur Kaluma in as your long-term 3. Backcourt would still be De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Huerter, Davion Mitchell off the bench. They have Malik Monk there still. So it's kind of about replacing Harrison Barnes, or at least having a replacement in case Harrison Barnes does, in fact, leave. And Kaluma is a player I really like. A very good defensive player. That's what he mostly did last year for Creighton. But in the March Madness tournament, Ryan Kalkbrenner was not able to go. Arthur Kaluma stepped up big, and I think that's a big moment for him. I was actually kind of surprised that he didn't test the draft status a little bit and, you know, get some talks in with NBA executives on what to really improve in his game and what they want to see from him a little bit more. I was kind of expecting that from him. We didn't really see that as much, so I still think he's a first-round level player. I'm higher on Kaluma than most, but I think he's still a player that a lot of teams are going to have interest in right around this 20 range, and I have him going here at 18. Pick 19 now, the Chicago Bulls here at this spot. This pick comes from the Portland Trailblazers based on the protections it would convey here. So Chicago here at this spot is going to look at center Derek Lively from Duke, who has really struggled up to this point, the time I'm recording this, but the tools are there. He's a very toolsy player, and I really like that. When you think about where Chicago's at right now, Nikola Vucevic, impending free agent, Andre Drummond they brought in. Again, that's not something you're planning long term, so you have to find some type of center that's going to fit with your team. And I've been saying it for a while now. I think that Chicago would have been much better off just not trading for Nikola Vucevic in general. I think that was a mistake of a move from Arturas Karnisovas. And quite frankly, they have to try and figure out ways to probably replace Vucevic. I think that they need a defensive-minded center and somebody who's going to be able to protect the rim, block shots, and get out and run. And Derek Lively does all of those things. Now, does he do it at a high enough level to be a starting NBA center? We haven't seen that yet, which is why he slid in this mock draft. He missed most of the preseason for Duke. I think that we're seeing some difficulties because of that, but I still trust in what I saw from this kid at the high school level. His athleticism, his talent did pop there. There's not a lot of guys who jump as high as Derek Lively. I talked about Khalil Ware's athleticism. I think Derek Lively is equally athletic, if not more. So there's a lot of talent to look at here. There's a lot to work with. It's just about getting him up to speed, and I trust Billy Donovan to do that. We've seen him do that in the past with Florida Gators. We've seen him do that in the past with some big men at the NBA level. Now I think Derek Lively is going to be his next challenge. Pick 20, the Toronto Raptors here now. They've been a little up and down this year, but I think that there's more up than down for this team, and there's a lot to build off of. Scotty Barnes been really kind of learning that point guard position, which I like for them. But I still think that there's a need to get a true guard in there, someone who's kind of a combo guard, maybe not a true point, still lets you use Scotty Barnes the way Nick Nurse wants to. But Terquavion Smith here, a player that I think a lot of others look at as a lottery talent. For me, I'm just not quite there on him because I don't see him ever being a point guard. I see him always being like a Jordan Clarkson type, which is a really good player to add here, by the way. At pick 20, if you can get a bench spark plug like Terquavion Smith, who's going to come in and score the basketball with ease. He's a very good shot maker on all three levels. He's very confident, and I think he's growing as a playmaker. I don't think he's a net negative passer by any means. I just don't know if I trust him to ever be like a true starter. And then is he big enough to be a 2? I don't know. I don't think that's probably in the cards for him, but that's okay because I think that six men is one of the most important things to add to your team. And I think Toronto right now needs a guard like that. Malachi Flynn provides that to a certain extent, but I think Terquavion Smith's a little bit more reliable, a little bit more consistent. So that's why I like him here for Toronto. Pick 21, the Clippers here now at this spot. And they've been pretty impressive this year, even with Kawhi Leonard, Paul George having some injury difficulties. Nothing new there. So what is this team going to target? For me, I'm going with forward/guard Grady Dick from Kansas. This might feel a little low to everybody else, and to me potentially as well. I have a hard time kind of placing him here at this spot, at least this early in the season, because one, some teams might say, hey, we really need the shooting. We're just going to take the shooting, especially ahead of the trade deadline here. I don't exactly know what everyone's roster is going to look like on draft night. If I did, I'd be a wizard. I'm not one. My co-creator Austin is. But when we talk about Grady Dick, there's a lot still to look at. He's got the requisite length to be a wing. He's got the name. He's got the game. Sorry. He's somebody who I think when you look at him, the athleticism stood out to me a little bit more than I was expecting. Obviously, you get one look at him and you don't think he's going to be the most athletic guy in the gym, but he's been a good athlete. And I think that there's a lot that the Clippers could unlock here. Luke Kennard, somebody who I think could be involved in trade discussions as well at some point. So this would be almost your Luke Kennard replacement. If a trade were to come down, Grady Dick, I think a pretty nice option for the Clippers. Pick 22, the Utah Jazz here now. This pick comes from the Philadelphia 76ers through the Brooklyn Nets. So here at this pick, the Utah Jazz would look at center/forward Kyle Filipowski. This pick screams Danny Ainge to me. He prefers drafting players of this melanin. He really likes players like Kelly Olynyk. And he's right there at home in Utah. So Kyle Filipowski would make some sense because he is a talented big man. He's had some really nice moments for Duke this year. I still think he's got to get a little bit stronger. He's not the most athletic guy, but he is a little bit more skilled than some of the other big men at this point. He's comfortable stepping out and shooting the three. He hasn't shot a great clip up to this point for the Blue Devils, but he's also able to put the ball on the deck, play make for others a little. And with the right development and the right maturation to his game, he could become a really good NBA player. I firmly believe that, and that's one of those risks here at 22. You get to this spot in the draft, and you're looking at what can the upside be here for this guy? If things go right, what can he become? And I think there's a lot on the table there for Filipowski. Pick 23 now, we got the Memphis Grizzlies here now, and with this pick, there's some things to consider. I think the one big thing, Tyus Jones last summer signed a 2-year deal with them, which means he's going to be expiring not this year, but the end of next year. So let's get a guard in the room. Give him a year to develop, probably play in the G League a bit for the Memphis Hustle. Give him some time to learn kind of what it's like to be an NBA guard, and that's Jalen Hood-Schifino here from Indiana. The Hoosiers guard, he was a nice complimentary piece at Montford. Now he's in a bigger role at Indiana. I think that we're going to see him probably take steps as the year goes on. I don't think he stood out super well up to this point of the year, but I still think that there's a lot of talent here. I think he's a quality playmaker. He's got good size for the position. And Memphis, if you're looking at it from their perspective, do you want to continue to pay Tyus Jones $15 million a year for the foreseeable future? Probably not. Now, Tyus Jones does a really great job commanding a second unit, doesn't turn over the basketball, and he does get a good amount of assists. So his assist-to-turnover ratio is really high. But I think Jalen Hood-Schifino, somebody who long-term, get him on a cheaper contract, drafting him back into the first round, give him a year to develop behind Tyus Jones and Ja Morant, and then you're cooking with gas from there. Pick 24, the Los Angeles Lakers here now. This pick comes from the Pelicans in that swap that we talked about a little bit earlier from the Anthony Davis trade. And the Lakers here need this pick. They need this pick to be a really good one. And I think Chris Murray is somebody who he's going to start to climb here a little bit further into the season. He had his marquee signature game, probably the best game of his entire college career just the other day. I believe he scored upwards of 25 points, and he just looked the part. And I was kind of expecting him to take that step forward for Iowa. Of course, the departure of his brother Keegan Murray kind of opened stuff up for him here now for the Hawkeyes. And I think the Lakers need players like Chris Murray who are timely, in the right place, don't try to do too much, and play winning basketball. We know Keegan Murray does all of those things, and to be honest, Chris Murray does as well. He's just a little bit less talented. So it's not going to solve all the issues here for the Lakers, but the Lakers, if they put stuff together right, they couldn't have cap space this free agency. You make a couple right selections. If Max Christie takes steps forward this year, they could have some nice pieces there that all of a sudden things just kind of fit into place. And hopefully you're just praying that LeBron James stays LeBron James even well into his late 30s. Pick 25, the Indiana Pacers here now. And Pacers fans, you probably been sitting here waiting, where's the Pacers at? Well, they've been winning too many games, so they're down here in the 20s. And pick 25, what a great spot to be. Tyrese Halliburton, one of the best point guards in the league. Talked about how great Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is in the West. Well, Tyrese Halliburton is doing a lot of the same stuff in the East. Now, he's not scoring as much, but he's leading the league in assists right now. He's also somebody who's not top 25 in turnovers. The last time we saw that was, I believe, 2015 with Chris Paul, where Chris Paul was with the Clippers. So that team went far. I think Indiana can go as far as Tyrese Halliburton takes him. He's one of the best young players in the world. And I think Benedict Matherin's on route to become that as well. So right now, Indiana's playing with house money. And to add to that, they're going to look at a guy like Leonard Miller, a forward who's playing for G League Ignite this year. Not my favorite prospect. I'm going to be completely honest with you. But when you look at Indiana, they need more wings. They need more potential ball handling talent. I think Leonard Miller offers that. If you watch this kid play, though, every time he tries to drive past somebody, he has to chicken wing them to get by them because he doesn't know actually how to blow by anybody at the professional level. He didn't know how to do that at the college level. In fact, you go back to some of his old, FIBA U18 tape for when he was playing for Canada, some of his actual high school tape, he would do that same thing. It's a really bad habit that he has. Somehow, G League Ignite coaching has not got it out of him yet. And I'm afraid that he never will, which that should be a super easy offensive foul call. Now, Kyle Anderson does it all the time as well, and he never gets called for it. So maybe Leonard Miller can get away with it. But nonetheless, I think that he kind of positionally fits what they're looking for. The upsides for him, size, he's about 6'8". He's lengthy. He's got like a 7-foot wingspan. And he's someone who can play make. He's had moments where he flashes behind the back passes. He sees the floor. It's just, I'm not sure if all the skills are there to put it all together, but I think people are hopeful for that. Last year, when I talked about him as a draft prospect, when he considered going to the draft, I considered him the most undraftable player I've ever watched. Seriously. Like, when you're looking at a player who, like, you're seriously considering if this guy's a good draft prospect or not, I was watching it and I couldn't help but laugh half the time because he just did not look like an NBA prospect to me at all. He has taken steps forward. He looks much better this year. And I'm very glad that he did not go up for the draft last year because it just would not have panned out well for his long-term career. I still think that he could use a little bit more time, to be honest, but he's at least better and maybe a little bit more worth talking about in the first round this year. Pick 26, we're staying on the topic of Indiana. And in addition to Leonard Miller, they're going to go in and add another forward here in Jordan Walsh. The way I'm looking at it here at this spot, I'm presuming the Pacers don't trade Miles Turner, which means they don't need a big man. So let's get some wings. Leonard Miller, Jordan Walsh, who's really athletic, can jump at the gym. And I think he's a player who, for Arkansas, he hasn't been asked to do a lot, but he's been really effective. We talked about Dylan Mitchell being comfortable playing without the basketball. Jordan Walsh is kind of cut of that same cloth. He's comfortable not being the guy. Now, that's not necessarily something that's a super positive trait when it comes to draft status, but for Indiana, you already have the guy. It's Tyrese Halliburton. Jordan Walsh can fit in. He's going to be a good athlete. He's going to be an effort defender. The talent, probably not a high-end player in this draft, as indicated by pick 26, but he's somebody who I think is going to have a nice long career. He's going to stick around. We've seen players of the same archetype, Corey Brewer. You think about guys like him, Jeff Green, who probably was a little bit better when he was younger as a player. You think back to his Supersonics days, but nonetheless, Jordan Walsh, he's a player who's going to be able to function in this league off the basketball, and I think that's where his value comes. Pick 27, Charlotte back on the clock now. The Hornets here, after earlier going with Amen Thompson, they're going to be looking for a little bit more forward talent. And Jalen Wilson, welcome to the first round from the Kansas Jayhawks. He has been lighting it up this year. He's been the best player on the Kansas Jayhawks. We saw his teammate Grady Dick go earlier. Well, Jalen Wilson's been better. The issue is he's a little bit older, so the draft value is maybe not as high. Kind of reminds me of what we talked about with Wendell Moore Jr. last year, a player who Wendell Moore was just really good in college and someone who I believe to be a near first round level talent, or someone who I would at least consider in the back end of the first. I think Jalen Wilson kind of falls into that same category. He's smart. He's good. He plays the right way. He knows how to take over a game at the college level. He won't do that at the NBA level, but having a player who's done some of those things before can be really advantageous for when a big moment comes and he has to hit a clutch shot. He might be willing to. And you think about Charlotte's perspective here, no Miles Bridges right now. They need to find a way to get a forward in that room, and I think Jalen Wilson's someone who suffices. Pick 28, we got the Phoenix Suns here now, and a lot of credit to this team. With the way that the season ended for them last year, it could have gotten really ugly in Phoenix for kind of how that whole situation's played out with Robert Sarver. You know, DeAndre Ayton wasn't super happy through free agency as he didn't even get an offer from Phoenix. They ended up just matching the offer sheet from Indiana. Well, look at them now. They've been winning a lot of games, so a lot of credit to them. And I'm going to go with guard Adam Miller here from LSU. Welcome to the first round mock, Adam Miller. Anyone who's been watching the channel for a while knows last year I was really excited about Adam Miller, and then he tore his ACL, and I was devastated. Adam Miller, at times, was the best player for USA U19 back when Chet Holmgren, Jaden Ivey, Adam Miller, that team, when they won gold against Victor Wembanyama against France, he was the best player at moments in that run. And I was so excited for him to play in Will Wade's offense. Then he tears his ACL. Will Wade gets fired. Everything seemingly falls apart. Well, he comes back this year and he's had a pretty good start to the year. In fact, he had a huge clutch shot the other night that won a game for LSU. I really believe in this guy. I think that he's one of the more talented players in this draft. He's got all the on-ball creation that you could ask for. And if you're looking at Phoenix, why would they want this, right? They have Chris Paul, Devin Booker. You think about the bench, Cam Payne, Landry Shamet. Yes, there's some offensive punch there, but not really in terms of the on-ball creation element. I think that's one thing that they are really badly missing. We talked about some potential trades for Phoenix that they could look to add that through. If they choose to not go that way, I think a draft pick for Adam Miller would make sense. Now, I know James Jones doesn't really value these draft picks as much as other GMs, other presidents of basketball operations. Credit to him for getting that promotion. But Adam Miller here, somebody, if they do have this pick, I would highly consider. I love this kid's game. I really do. I hope I'm coming across as glowingly about him as I really feel, because I think he's one of the more talented players in all of college basketball. Pick 29, Houston Rockets here. This pick comes from the Milwaukee Bucks. And with this pick, after earlier having a selection, I'm going to go with forward Ryan Rupert, who is playing overseas in the NBL right now. And you look back even to his some of his French film, he's a forward who kind of reminds me a little bit of Joe Ingles in terms of the fact that you can have him play make a little bit. When he's going downhill, he's pretty skilled. And Joe Ingles at this stage of his career was not a good shooter. Ryan Rupert, I think a little bit further along in that, but not somebody I'm going to say is going to constantly knock down a ton of shots. Realistically, for Houston long-term, I think it would be better to trade out of this pick. Not that I dislike Ryan Rupert. I think that there's a lot of talent still here with Ryan Rupert. But I think just with how young this Rockets team is, I think that having too many young guys in a room can actually be really tough for development staffs and coaching staffs to get the most out of them. So I think that they need to consolidate a little bit, send this pick out to a future year via trade, and see if you can, you know, once your guys are a little bit older, once Jalen Green's 24, 25, turn this pick into something down the road. I think that's what I would shoot to do, but it's not because I'm not a believer in Ryan Rupert. I think he's got a lot of talent, actually. Then pick 30, final pick here of the first round, the Indiana Pacers here on the clock. Again, this pick comes from the Celtics. They've had 3 of the last 6 picks, and Day'Ron Holmes here is the pick for me. I talked about how I wasn't going to go center with those other 2 picks. I still think if Day'Ron Holmes is here at 30, he's one of the more productive players for Dayton this year. They've been a little disappointing, to be honest with you. Day'Ron Holmes hasn't stood out as much as I would hope, but I still think at this pick, you have to consider a big man. I also thought about Adam Bona from UCLA. There's some other options around the nation, right? Maybe even, a guy like Oscar Tshiebwe, who I don't think is a first-round level player, but think about what they did last year with Nembhard. They took Nembhard 31st. What's really the difference between 30 and 31? Well, it's guaranteed money. So Tshiebwe would be in consideration, I think, if this was pick 31, not 30. So that's a big difference between just one pick. So Day'Ron Holmes, a couple years younger than Tshiebwe, a little bit more upside. I think quite a bit more athletic. I like him as a draft prospect still. He struggled more this year than I was hoping to see. But for the most part, I still think there's some talent here for Indiana to pull out. Hopefully you guys did enjoy today's video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Remember, go to Twitter and give us a follow on there. Link is in the description. And I just want to urge you guys, again, hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate each and every one of you taking time out of your day to watch this video. I worked really hard on this, so I hope you enjoy. And we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.